Ineffective, the tail wagging the dog,
dysfunction,
models that don't work anymore,
the mistake in the way we're organized.
I don't think there's been a lot of room allowed traditionally for innovation with board membership.
The world of nonprofits has become so complicated.
Board of directors are the most dysfunctional groups I've ever encountered.
Well, as it relates to volunteer boards, I wanted to defer to the nonprofit management expert, Peter Drucker, who said there's one thing boards all have in common, and it's they do not function.
But what should motivate you is that you really care about the mission.
The primary motivation for joining a board needs to be that they think they can contribute their expertise and their skill and talent to the need of the organization.
We have enough stress in our lives. So why do we want to voluntarily join a board that is just going to add stress to our lives? So I think rather than looking at board service as the right thing to do, rather than looking at board service as, oh, I want to be involved, let's begin to look at board service as fun. Let's begin to look at board service as something we can enjoy because we're interacting with other people and we're growing the impact of an organization. So I think the number one criteria to serving on a board should be, is it fun? Does this give me energy? Does this give me life? Because if it is stressful, if it is difficult, if it is not fun, then we should not be doing it.
they don't need to be trained, they need to be educated. Like, you don't go to school to get a board governance degree. Nobody does.
Now, if you just get volunteers from the community with no training who show up and write a small check, you're not advancing the cause in any sense.
It is a very odd idea that we need to train a board member. It got passed on to us that things are different in the nonprofit world, and things are no different. It is about running a business. It is about managing people. It is about encouraging leaders to lead and be visionary, which is no different than any other part of our lives.
Too much of CEOs' time is spent managing their board, training their board, paying attention to their board, and that board members should be chosen for their proficiency and their knowledge base and the scope of their responsibilities and roles narrowly defined so that training per se is not needed.
We think somehow in the nonprofit sector, we have the cornerstone on ethics, that we should train our board members on how to be ethical, as if they don't know how to be ethical in their personal and business lives. It's a very, very odd thing.
As a CEO, invited these individuals and professionals to be a part of your board of directors, you should know going into it that they are ethical people who have their own moral compass. And why would you ever have them on your board if you need to train them in ethics? This is an enormous waste of time. It is promoted by the old guard of nonprofit associations. It's just a joke.
No, board members should not be required to fundraise any more than board members of a for-profit company should be required to sell the product. Take your favorite company, Starbucks, for example. How many of those board members have been baristas? It makes no sense at all when we have this idea that, oh, you just need to get a better board and you need your board to fundraise. And we've been trying to do this for 30, 40, 50 years and it hasn't worked.
No, I think board members should not be required to fundraise, frankly. This goes back to the old financial model. You know, nonprofits recruited people who had deep pockets with the hope that they would give money and leave their brains at home. I think it's just the opposite. You want the people for their intellectual business acumen.
Let me tell you how we treat board members. There's this great guy, this great woman. They're entrepreneurial. They're successful in our communities. And we go to them and we say, Jack, I want you to know why I'm involved in this amazing organization. We're making a big difference. If you served on the board, man, it'd be a great contribution. It's about 10 hours a month. That's 120 hours a year. And really something I think that would have your best interest in mind and would help all involved. Now, what we forgot to tell this guy is that when he gets on the board, he actually has to pay to be on the board because we have to have 100% board giving. The second thing that we didn't tell him is that he has to fundraise. Now, he's never going to be good at fundraising. He doesn't like to fundraise, and we're going to persecute him or her for the next 3 years for not fundraising. Friends, this is our model. It is ridiculous.
The majority of nonprofit organizations, when they hear the term pay your board members or offer an honorarium, would be appalled and they would be offended and they would think, oh, that's not the way we should do things. We should never honor our board in that way. And that's because this broken idea, this piety has been handed down to them that board members are just supposed to serve, fundraise, be wonderful, and never get anything in return. And so the way we recruit our board members is we say, oh, we just need you to come to a couple meetings and we just think you're a wonderful person. And then once they get on the board, then we require them to give and we require them to fundraise and we just burn them out.
I think most nonprofits, when you tell them that they should consider paying directors a fee for their time, end up in a major cognitive dissonance. It's so contrary to the culture. But paying someone is not giving money away. It's an exchange for value. And if you pay someone and they come and they bring their acumen and their skills to the room, it's not giving money away. It's an mutual exchange of value.
It's a very odd thing that we somehow would be offended by the idea of an honorarium to a board. What would it look like if we paid our board members $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a year as an honorarium to serve? You know what would happen? Everyone would show up for every meeting and everyone would actually read the newsletters and the reports because they would have a vested interest in serving on that board. Plus, then we would have our pick of the best board members in our communities simply because we're willing to honor them for their time.
The insistence that board members have to be volunteers, I think, is an anachronism. I mean, that's an old model. It just doesn't work in the modern world as I see it.
If I were to craft the perfect board, it would be a lean team of 5 to 7 individuals, all professionals who have expertise in the areas of business, HR, finance, nonprofits, marketing and advertising.
For me, while those expert subject areas are important, it's more about a board who supports the vision of the CEO and is supportive of the CEO. Now, we do want the board to hold the CEO accountable for the goals that she sets in terms of growing impact and growing revenue, but ultimately the board understands that it is her purview to run the organization. They don't need to be involved in the day-to-day management of the organization. They are there for advice and accountability.
If we take a step back and take a 30,000-foot view, the perfect board is the board that understands its role vis-a-vis the CEO. What really you need to look at is one thing: the marriage between the board and the CEO. That's it. That's where it begins and that's where it ends. That is the driver of success in any nonprofit.
So how do we get out of this mess? Well, first of all, we have to understand that we are going to defy convention. In the heart of hearts, CEOs who hear this message on how to craft their board in a way where the board works for them and the board supports them, though they do reserve the right to fire that CEO, so there's this checks and balance. CEOs know in their heart that what I am sharing is correct.
When people feel invested in the nonprofit they're serving on, and it's the famous adage, which you probably might have all heard, but is worth repeating, which is if you ask for money, you get advice, and if you ask for advice, you get money. If you truly empower the board members in an appropriate manner, and you have the guidelines that you don't go off the rails like I've talked about earlier, then these people feel, you know what, I'm really making a difference and I want to support in any way they can, whether it be financially or not necessarily financially, but in other ways, work, wisdom, wealth, as we all say. Those are actual things that go on when a nonprofit really is thriving. And I've seen it. It does happen. And when it does happen, it's gold